On the morning of November 8th, 2018, the campfire broke out. 17 days, 153,000 acres, and nearly 19,000 structures later, it became the deadliest and most destructive fire in California's history and completely decimated the community of Paradise. 1 year later, former Paradise High School principal Loren Lighthall sits down with us to reflect on that fateful day and talk about his fresh start as principal at Hughson High School. Where were you when you heard that a fire had broken out, and can you kind of take us through that day of what you did next and what you saw?
Well, it's not unusual to have fire in that area, and so I think a lot of people there are used to it. I'm not, so I mean it made me very nervous, much more so than I think other people. But when I got to the school in the morning, it started with a smoke plume. Around 8 o'clock, a assistant principal came in with just a huge piece of bark that was smoking and it had fallen out of the sky. And that kind of got our attention a little bit. So I remember texting at 8:11 that school was going to be canceled. It's pretty easy to evacuate a high school when school hasn't started. So we were pretty fortunate that way. And we stayed until about 9:30, 10 o'clock, waiting for the last kids to get picked up. We still didn't really know how bad it was until maybe, mostly the next day. And then you're still holding out hope that your house is going to be okay. But people are like, well, did you stay with a friend? I'm like, no, all my friends' house burned down. So you lose your church, your work, your school, your home, your neighbors. It's a lot to deal with, especially for family units that, I'm not from the area. I don't even know anybody, really up there. So it was difficult to do that,
You had to worry about not only the safety of your students, but I'm sure you were thinking about your family at that time too. What was that like?
Yeah, so I just told my family to leave. I mean, it was a little bit scarier for us because we're not used to fire danger. And so they left right away. I think a lot of people that got stuck in the fire with cars full of stuff that burned, they're just not as worried or nervous about the fire danger, and they probably stayed a little bit too long. It's very traumatizing. I mean, because you're thinking about what it would be like to die by death by fire, while you're sitting there and you can't move. So it was difficult. It's still difficult to deal with the fallout of that, and it was horrible for the high school. And we had to go to a different location. We had to do an online school, then we had to go to an old Facebook building. Kids had to travel really far. They had to be in way too close quarters with their parents. For a week, a month, it's okay, but month after month after month, it just wears on kids to not have their own space, not be around their friends. They're very friend-centric. To be able to really just be what a normal teenager experiences. And it's been tough on me. I mean, I'm a pretty well-adjusted adult. I mean, I'm happily married. I have 7 kids and a religion. And it's really hard for me. You're just not used to dealing with things of that magnitude or having to process trauma like that when you have a pretty good life. It's just difficult to deal with all of that. And I think, most of us are still dealing with it in some way or another. I can't watch the ESPN 360. I can't watch the Netflix documentary. I made it 8 minutes for the ESPN one. I just have to stop. I mean, it's just not something I'm interested in reliving, but you probably have to process it and deal with it, which I'm not doing, and I don't know if other people are, but it's been difficult for folks to deal with it.
Was that decision still a difficult one to make, to leave Paradise?
It was a difficult decision to leave Paradise because you're kind of like an anchor family. Like if the principal leaves, or if a certain pastor leaves, or the police chief, the other people think, well, gosh, maybe we should leave. It kind of plants the seed for people. So I was really worried about that. And then, people thinking that you're abandoning them. And people may have thought that, but they just express gratitude and gratefulness. And you have kind of a shared experience together, which kind of bonds you together. But seeing and dealing with the trauma every day just becomes too much.
How has Hughson High School helped you turn over a new leaf and start working on the next chapter of your life after the fire?
Yeah, I just think Hughson's very welcoming, and it's a great school, and it has a great culture. It really is just kind of a unified environment. I go to a meeting every month with the police chief and the fire chief and the pastors and the school leaders, and we plan events, we work together, and it's really been nice and refreshing to be accepted and to have the high school work so closely with all these other organizations with no real adversity or problems. It's been great to experience.
What advice would you give to someone who has lost their home, whether it be, they've just become homeless, or maybe they lost their home in a fire or a hurricane or something like that, just having gone through what you've been through?
Well, I was just so grateful for a lot of people that helped us. I mean, we had a GoFundMe page, and it was like $30,000 in one day. And I know people don't know some of those kinds of people where they can have those kind of resources, but there is a lot of help out there, and there is a lot of people that care, churches and individuals and organizations that help you get back on your feet. I mean, this happened just before Christmas. And, you're dealing with the insurance companies, and you're dealing with all of this stuff that just makes it not very much fun. And people did so many great things for the school and for us. It's very refreshing to go through the process and see how great people are and how much they care. And there's a lot of resources out there for folks. They just got to get to them.
Now, PG&E did claim responsibility for the Camp Fire, and currently, the talk of the state is the blackouts. Do you still harbor any negative feelings toward PG&E for starting the fire 1 year later, and what do you think about the blackouts?
I don't really harbor any negative feelings toward PG&E. One, it's unproductive. It doesn't really solve anything. There's certainly fault. They've admitted that. And I think it's kind of time to move past it, because if you focus on that, it'll drive you crazy. The blackouts seem extreme. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but I guess if you shut it off in one place, you have to shut it off in the other, they say. But there'll be no wind for days, and the power will be off. There's got to be a better way. I mean, people have to take their medication, they lose all their food, it's expensive to run a generator as an additional expense, and you can't have school because you can't flush the toilets. And so it seems kind of extreme. But I wish they'd have shut it off the day that we had the campfire too, so it's kind of a catch-22.